Good morning. I wanted to note down two things before I forget, and it's in relation to the first comment is in relation to the large clearing, the batch clearing, with respects to my friend that came over. I told that story in an earlier recording, but the huge improvements that he had from doing the large batch clearing, but one clearing with the batch clearing. And then I just want to say that I did find it really interesting that even though it has such huge progress, he still had, when we did the muscle testing, he still had a reversed test where no was yes and yes was no. And I just wanted to make a comment on that I think it's kind of interesting that still so much success was made from the subconscious clearing, even though he still has this reversed state. So that was kind of interesting, and there are ways to flip that, and I'm not going to get into those here, but there is a way to reverse it back. You can force reverse it back, and sometimes changing different patterns or different energies can also change it back, and sometimes sometimes I think it will just kind of flip back and forth during circumstances. So I think it'd be interesting. I'm gonna have to do a little more research on that reversal, because I think it would be really kind of cool to understand it better. What really causes that. I see it quite a bit. I almost feel like I see it more than I should. So it would be interesting. I'm gonna have to make that a point of research and get back to you on that. And the other thing was more of just a physical anomaly that I found with the other clearing, which was the percentage clearing, and the one where we're going for a power level increase. And one thing for sure that I noticed with that was when I did the clearing, especially with respects to my, I was trying to turn up my metabolism and basically increase my power for weight loss. And I thought it was kind of interesting that after I did all that work, and I cleared for other things too, and those were two of the things that were on the list, but I did clear for those as well. But I went for some other things like wealth and joy, I think it was joy, or no, relationships and love and just some of the basic stuff. I think empathy and compassion were on that list. But anyway, I thought it was really interesting because that was the one I was talking about, where I tried to do the clearing, but it was so much that I literally had to take a break and stop. But when I went to go to sleep that night, I was just kind of laying there, and I could literally feel twitching throughout my body, and I thought that was kind of interesting, literally twitching throughout, just all over the anatomy, like it almost felt like, gosh, I don't know, like getting flicked a little bit, but it was the muscle that was doing strange things. So it was just such a weird anomaly, and I just wanted to share that, because I did more work last night with it, and it's funny because it repeated, it did it again. So it is kind of a curious thing, and you feel that, and your body is literally like doing this thing where you're almost like feel like flips, like switches are flipping on, or something's going on, and your body's just reacting. It's very strange. So I guess what I want to say is, if people want to do this work, that's cool. Just know that that is something that I experienced. I'm not saying you will, but I guess if you feel it, don't be worried. I mean, nothing bad is happening. But there is so much energy that's going through our anatomy, and our body is energy, and so it's just kind of interesting when you're doing that much, clearing so many things at once, and then you're turning your power levels up, and you're literally feeling your body making these really strange adjustments throughout your system. It's just very strange. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that because those two things, I thought they were worthy of noting. I guess if you haven't heard the other audios, that may not make any sense, but that's okay. I'm not going to put too much time in on that, but hopefully you heard the video before this, and it'll be a part 1. Part 2, because I wanted to come back to yesterday. Yesterday I went and I shared an experience of contrast, and shared one of those bad day scenarios, which wasn't really a bad day, but one of those days where there was some conflict or strife. And I do this because I want people to understand what this process really looks like. I think it's kind of interesting, the people that I'm around seem to get a lot of benefit from watching me go through these things, and they watch me accelerate myself, and I keep raising the bar for myself, but I think there's something very healthy in allowing people to see what the process really looks like, and to know that it's not this happy, joy. The minute you start doing this work, everything is gravy. It's not. What makes it good is, that we're learning and growing. And so last night was kind of interesting because, I watch these sequences of events, and I talk about them a lot, the synchronicity, and I talk about these things, but I think it's really helpful. It's been really helpful for the people that know me when I share those stories, because it helps them to understand what to look for. Like, this is how it can present itself. And so that's something that I think it's a valuable thing, and I want to be completely open and honest with people and just share these stories, because I think they can benefit from those, because then they'll understand how that type of thing can present itself, so that they can look for that in their own lives. So for me, yesterday, things didn't really work out the way I wanted them to, and it wasn't that they turned out badly. It's that my perception of them turned out, badly. And so, I had this traumatic moment where I was feeling exactly like I had felt in the past in a situation, and it was a terrible feeling. It was like being there all over again. And I was recommending to people that if they have the opportunity to kind of sit with that and allow it just to be, without kicking themselves or being judgmental, or but trying to put some pieces together for where is this coming from? Is it coming from me? Is it coming from something else? What do I think it's coming from? If you can put your finger on it, is this a past, present, or future situation? Am I upset about something that I think is going to happen, or am I upset about something that's happened in the past? Am I in the past? Am I in the present? Or am I in the future? Kind of trying to just getting your head around it a little bit, just because you're with it, you're in it. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity moment for you to be presented with something that's going to allow you to grow, if you can be aware of it and observe it in a healthy way. So really, that's what we're aiming for, and those moments are always going to be there, but the question is that how extremely do we experience them? And part of how extremely that we experience them is how much trauma we have stored, and the subconscious beliefs that we hold. And so these things, they feel worse. So when we're in a calmer state, or when we're in a state of being able to observe it, or we can get our head around it long enough to know this feeling that I'm feeling is coming from something. It feels real, but it's not necessarily real. So I just need to, pause and be with it and observe it without getting too deep into it. So the more you can just observe it, the more you can diffuse it, and that's a very powerful tool to have. But if you can't quite get your head around it, just allow yourself to feel it, and just try and put those few questions to yourself. Is this coming from me? Is it coming from something else? Is it something that's happened in the past? Is it something that I've been afraid of but would happen in the future? Is it really happening? And kind of assess, is this a legitimate fear or concern or whatnot? And it's really just about trying to put it into perspective and backing up and looking at that picture to really have a clearer look at it. But when you're in it, when you're really, really in it, and you're in that pain, and you're in that fear, and you're feeling that terror, or you're feeling that trauma, that may not always be the best time to do it. And sometimes one of the things I like to do is, while it's great, and I can do questions, and I can do subconscious testing with muscle testing, and I can just go for it and try and clear things I think it is, sometimes I just like to let things play out. I like to let the universe speak to me, so to speak, or let my own whole self, that part of me that really does know everything, just kind of present these things to me in the way that it's ready to present them to me. So here's how this went. So last night I did not go home. I didn't make a list. I would suggest it if you can, but I didn't. I had stuff I needed to do. So I came home. I tried to let go of the day. And I was just going to allow these things to just kind of present themselves. That's how I decided I was going to do it. So I sat on the couch, and it was kind of interesting because I'm watching this show, and it's a mystery because I just love, I love mysteries because, it's just my nature. I like to figure things out. So, and one of the quotes in there was, I think they said it was a quote from Yogi Bear, where he said, I'm trying to remember this exactly, but it was along the lines of, if the world was always perfect, it wouldn't be. And that's it. That's absolutely right. If the world was always perfect, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be, because there wouldn't be growth, there wouldn't be expansion, there wouldn't be lessons, we wouldn't be learning anything. I sat down with my little daughter, and she was having kind of a meltdown, and she had done something, and she was upset. This was maybe a week or two ago. I said to her, well, what's the lesson in this? What did you learn? And, she's 3, and she said, that I shouldn't lie, I think was her lesson. And she says, I shouldn't lie. And I said, okay, then there was no mistake. And she didn't quite, she was trying to understand. I said, was there a mistake? Yes, I made a mistake. Okay, well, what did you learn? It's like, I learned I shouldn't have lied. Okay, then there was no mistake. Did you learn something? Yes, then there was no mistake. It was a lesson. It was a lesson. So she learned something. So that's the same concept. If the world was perfect, it wouldn't be. We wouldn't be growing. It would be like a plastic tree instead of a tree that actually grows and changes colors, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. That's life right there. So that's what we're shooting for. But it's really about how do we maneuver through these. So then this morning, so back to my story here. So my experience of this trauma, this situation. This morning, my son and daughter, I wake up to my son and daughter, and they're arguing, and I hear my son saying, don't tell mom, don't tell her, and I can't hear the rest of it. I can only hear him saying, don't tell her. And I'm not a big fan of secret keeping, so like I said, I like mysteries, right? Because I'll be mysteries, so I don't like secrets. So they're they're in the hallway, and it's this big thing, and I thought something bad must have happened, because he's panicking and he's upset, and he does not want her to tell me. And she comes out and she's trying to tell me, and I said, I don't want to hear it from you, I want to hear it from him, what's going on. And he said, he says, nothing's going on. I said, I just heard you say that you didn't want to tell me something, so you're kind of lying right now, and you need to tell me what's going on. And so he's he's panicking, he's freaking out. And finally my daughter, she just tells me, even though I'm telling her, don't tell me, I want him to tell me, I'm not interested in the, he said, she said thing. And she tells me, well, he was trying to get dressed and surprise you, but I beat him to getting dressed. And so he literally goes to tears, and he's crying. And I feel kind of bad, because I thought that something had actually gone wrong, because they're trying to keep this big secret from me. But it turned out they were trying to keep a surprise from me, not a secret. And so, well, same thing, I guess. And so he is literally melting down. And I recognize this, I'm realizing It's like, and the funny thing is that we had had a similar incident the day before that, where he wanted something, and it didn't work out, and he was really, really upset about it. And so I set him down, and he's laying there, and I'm trying to explain to him, that things don't always work out the way you want them to, and and I told him, it's when we want an outcome to be something so badly, that we're inflexible. We can't, we're unwilling to be open to how things really work out. And so with him, what was happening is he wanted to be fully dressed and totally surprise me, and Katie and him were going to be completely dressed, and they'd come out and surprise me. And so the two of them, that was the plan. And so he had this firmly set in his mind of how this would be. And he's a very, very logical boy. He's very, he wants things to be in the box. Yeah, he's very creative too, but he likes things to, he plans things, very planning minded, very construction oriented in a sense, and he has a whole plan laid out, and that's how it needs to work out. So there's not a lot of flexibility there. And in our lives, we do this constantly, right? We have the perfect guy in mind, the perfect house in mind, the perfect, perfect, whatever it is, perfect job, perfect boss. Like we have this plan, and we're so married to that plan, but we're inflexible, and that actually works against us. And so what I was trying to tell him is almost like explaining to him the concept of being a boat on the water and going with the flow. And it's okay to head in the direction that you want to go as a boat, but you also need to be respectful of the ocean and go with its flow also. So you have to do both. You have to work with the ocean, and you still head in the direction you want to go, but it's going to bounce you around a bit, and it's going to move you, and in some cases it may send you in a totally different direction, and that might work out to your benefit. If it's because of a storm or who knows what. But in general, being that boat on the water, and he didn't quite understand that analogy very well. He kind of did, but he kind of didn't. Sorry. So instead I said, okay, let's try it this way. We have a pencil, and we have a straw. And I said, what happens when we try and bend the pencil? And he said, it breaks. I said, what happens if we try and bend the straw? He said, the straw is fine. Well, actually, he said, there's a percentage chance that the straw might crack. And I said, that's fair. That's fine. You're probably right. But most of the time, the straw will be fine, right? He says, yes, most of the time, the straw will be fine. So, which made me chuckle. So, as I'm explaining this to him, right, now here's how this all works, because this is the fun part. I'm realizing, of course, that the story that I'm telling him and the advice that I am sharing with him and this whole experience that's going on right now is the same problem that I had yesterday. Okay, that's how this works. So now I'm realizing that this whole experience has been partially to teach me and to teach him, and that it doesn't quite work out the way you thought it would. But that's okay, because you got a lesson from this, right? You learned something from it. What'd you learn? That you got to be flexible. You got to go with the flow, because the whole world operates from energy, and it works no differently really than water. It very much flows. And we talked about that water energy concept before. We were talking about kind of clearing the line out of those blockages, and then turning our power level up, or turning our water pressure up. It's very similar. And so here we are again, and we're talking about this being in this flow with energy, and how when you fight against it, you're going to probably crack like a pencil if you're very inflexible. So being flexible, much like the boat example, we head in the direction that we want to go. And we really, if our power level's up, that's going to be a real smooth ride, because we'll just be able to have a lot more energy that's working with us to make that possible. But if we are the boat that's trying to force our way through and against all the currents because we demand that it go in a certain direction and it absolutely has to have that outcome, we're probably going to end up capsized. I mean, it could be that bad. So, in a, kind of a worst case scenario. So it's largely about being that flexible person. I mean, what do they say about the, even when they talk about a drunk in an accident tends to live. Why is this? Because the person that's the person that's not drunk, they're not flexible. They're not as what's the word for it here? I'm just gonna say reverie. They're more aware of what's going on, and so they constrict and they tighten up and they tense up and they become stiff, and then because they see it coming, and then bam, and then they don't make it. But the person that's in the accident that's been drinking, typically they're not quite as aware. They're a lot more lucid and they're a lot more just loose, and they usually live through it. And it's that's probably not the entire scientific reason for it, but that's how it's been explained to me in the past. So it's just kind of an interesting analysis there. That's how we get through these things. Not drunk, but flexible. Hopefully not drunk. But no. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the whole point of it was that there was this huge lesson, and it was brought to me the very next day, and it was brought to me in two ways. One, the understanding of the quote, that if life was perfect, it wouldn't be, and the concept of that growth being necessary, and then the presentation of my son and his experience being exactly the lesson that I need to know, that I was so worried about. I had this anticipation of an outcome, that it didn't work out the way I thought it would, and instead of being flexible, I snapped like a pencil, and I was upset. So that's what I'm trying to. I wanted to share that with you because we did the whole talk yesterday about just allowing things to kind of be and letting it sit with it, and then just trying to just be compassionate for yourself, allow it to dissolve, and let the answers come to you. And sometimes it's just perfectly fine to say, I'm going to allow the answers to come to me, and set that in your mind that you want the answers to come to you, and then allow them to come. But see, in part, being flexible also means that you're also flexible in being open to seeing how those things came in. I could have just as easily assumed that what happened to my son had nothing to do with me. But because I was flexible enough to be open to the idea that this lesson may be a bigger lesson than just what he's going through, and try and connect the dots between, and staying open, I guess is what I want to say, to how these answers present. That I'm getting it from a quote on a television, that I'm seeing the connection between my son and what happened to me the day before. That is also the same concept as being flexible like the straw, or being the boat on the ocean, and going with those waves, and being aware of how that stuff comes in, and being open to how that stuff comes in. If I'm expecting these, if I say to the universe, send me the answer, and I'm like, and it needs to be on a billboard, and it needs to be on this road, and it needs to come in this way, or the answer needs to come to me from a web search, or the answer needs to come from someone I know at work. And these are also expectations, and we need to let them go and just be completely and absolutely open to how these things come into you, because that's how it comes in. That's how it all gets communicated, in these really kind of cool and strange ways. So anyway, so this was such a great example, and we did the lead-in yesterday, and that's how this plays out. So I really think that there's a huge benefit to people being able to see how that worked for me, and be able to have a clue as to how it's going to play out in a general way in your own life. I hope this is helpful, and have a great day.